The future of Star Wars. If that much bruised and battered entity can even be said to have a future, still clutched tightly in the talons of the devil herself, Kathleen Kennedy, and now also apparently tethered completely and utterly to Rey. Oh yeah, that's a brilliant decision right there. She was so popular in the previous movies, of course, so why wouldn't you build the entire franchise around the cardboard box that speaks? What could possibly go wrong? Well, just about everything, I believe, but, oh well, details. So, a couple more interesting little mini tidbits have emerged around the entire Disney future Star Wars nonsense thingy, including, of course, a bit more perspective on Disney's own plans. So, this appeared in a very progressive podcast that I had to suffer through, as the twats waffled on about how they absolutely adore Jedi Survivor, without being able to mention a single mechanic or story element or anything that they actually liked, whilst talking about how they all played through it on easy, and it still took them weeks, as they died frequently. God help me. Anywho, a couple of the side things first. Indiana Jones is... it's over and done with. It is dead. Harrison Ford was the only thing keeping that franchise somewhat afloat, as his name still does sell at least a couple of tickets, but now that they have all come together with the intent to bury his ass, metaphorically as well as literally, it appears, that franchise is gone. It's just simply over. As is any hope of Obi-Wan Kenobi's second season. Well, hope. That's not precisely the term I would like to apply here, but oh well. It too didn't work out very well, and is not going to be getting any sort of sequels or continuations, although a couple of the more despised characters, like Reva, will apparently be making some kind of appearance in the future. Yes. Please, a Reva spin-off series. That's what we need right now to make sure that Disney cannot dig itself out of the hole it's found itself in. Cement them in, please. But, alright. Star Wars. The whole Rey thing. The question asked by Kathleen Kennedy is, does the galaxy need the Jedi now, and does the galaxy want the Jedi back? Now, we know what the current year Disney answer is going to be. It's going to be yes, but they're going to need Rey back. So they're not going to actually get the Jedi, they're going to get the Reyites, which are basically some form of weird-ass mix between the dark side and the light side that are somewhat heroic, but not really. See, the thing is, Star Wars has been moving in this odd direction with the Acolyte TV show as well, where it's like, okay, there is no good or evil, which is an intriguing notion coming from somebody who's primarily a fan of 40k, of course, and history as well, but here's the problem. In Star Wars, there absolutely is good and evil, like straight up good or evil. Now, of course, there are, as always, varying degrees. Anakin, for example, could be redeemed, but Palpatine could not. It also got the potential idea of introducing the, as I like to call them, the Uzang Bong, those rabid little lunatics, which apparently were the supposed, and an interesting twist, too, to the building of the Death Stars. I actually quite like the idea of them, like coming in from the galaxy's outer edges, and the Emperor will be like, listen, we built the Death Star to fight off these, and you're disturbing us. I need to unite us all, unless we get wiped out. Okay. That's actually a pretty cool plot twist. A bit overdone in the current year, but nice nevertheless. The problem is, Disney doesn't understand how to do moral ambivalence, non-good nor evil. All they can do is, well, what they've been doing so far. Pure evil, pure good, and then misunderstood bad guys. Reva is the perfect example of this. Somebody who does incredibly bad shit, consistently and unendingly, but is totally a good person, you see, because she's doing it for the right reasons. To assassinate Darth Vader. Which she of course fails to do miserably and ends up achieving absolutely nothing. That's the issue. Redemption is a key point in Star Wars, but it's got to be actual, genuine redemption, and there needs to be a price to be paid as well. Anakin was redeemed because he's goddamn dead, and so all of the people he killed brutally aren't going to be able to show up and go, hey, don't do that, or well, their families anyways. Whereas Reva, well, all of the shit she committed, she's still alive apparently, and is now going to be redeemed the dumber way, the I was simply just a misunderstood bad guy way, the Blizzard way. Because, in theory, I think this is probably the correct direction for Star Wars to take, and maybe even for Disney to take. We saw recently that they yeeted a whole heaping load of shit of Disney Plus streaming service, which is a problem in and of itself, really, because, well, that's the problem with digital media. It could simply just disappear on your ass, but it was pretty much all woke programming, which Bob Iger specifically even admitted during the earnings call was the kind of programming that didn't actually drive growth or subscribers. It was a waste of production input, straight up, because people don't watch it, people don't want it. So, if they're intelligent, which they're not going to be, what would actually work is what I've been championing the last half decade or so, which is a more grounded and gritty style of Star Wars. Go back to the Clone Wars style of things. Go back to the Clone Troopers. Make essentially Band of Brothers, but in Star Wars, because this is where you can do the idea of no good or no evil. One of the biggest wasted opportunities in those terrible Disney Wars movies was Finn. Because Finn's story is, in theory, really, really goddamn interesting. Okay. You are raised, from birth pretty much, to believe that the Empire is good. It brings order and stability to the galaxy. Then you're brought into the academy, into the barracks, etc. You are yet further hammered in with all of the propaganda, the reinforcements. You are then raised alongside other people who believe the same as you, and you are taught to work together as a cohesive unit. You become a military formation with esprit de corps. And then you begin slowly realizing that maybe what you're fighting for, what you believed was right, wasn't actually correct after all. Now that should be a long and very carefully executed arc, because you need to break with everything you know, everything you believe, your friends, your brothers in arms, etc., all of that, to go towards the correct path and so on. But, of course, they didn't do that. Instead, Finn was like, the rebels are good, guys. Let's start killing my previous friends with blasters and laughing at it. Ha ha ha. Which made him an actual psychopath, mind you. And they never really brought it up ever again. But if you do it more grounded, okay. Let's say you've got a backwater garrison world, right? Just a bunch of stormtroopers. They believe in the generalized stuff, but they don't really have any particular convictions. They now have to deal with smugglers. Some of the smugglers are going to be actually bad, because they will be abusive elements within the rebellion as well. One of the actual neat little tricks that the Disney Wars did was the idea of the arms dealers. Like, wait, there are people selling arms to both sides, but slightly differently. Okay, that hints towards the shadowy back-end market. The arms industry, the dealers, the smugglers, they might not actually be good guys. They could simply just be war profiteers. A large element of the resistance is going to be literally built on the backs of people profiting of the conflict itself. There's a lot of shady dealings to be engaged with there, where you can give the stormtroopers a positive narrative and the rebels a positive narrative as well. This could give you an actually generally sort of neutral style story, which you could take in either direction. Maybe you want to build up the Empire as more of a sympathetic force in the galaxy to actually try and get people back into the universe and be like, okay, there is actually some depth here. Or maybe you want to go the old-fashioned way and just figure out a way to make them the good guys again, bringing a rebellion against the Imperium, blah blah blah. Honestly, I think the former would be more interesting, because the best part about Andor, for example, was not Andor himself, it was all of the additional building it did to the universe. The prison, for example, was really interesting and well thought out as well. This is probably how the Empire would run a prison. The Intelligence Bureau, too, was really, really cool. In fact, genuinely, I would love to see a series just from the perspective of the Imperial intelligence officers, so that you are in this position where you are cheering on these characters that you know, but at the same time you kind of want them to fail, because, well, they're going after the resistance. It gives you this sort of delicious twin motif, sort of. But again, you need to make them actually neutral, which is what Disney seems to fail to do. And the moment you bring in the Jedi into this, you fail right from the get-go. Because the Jedi are good, because they are fighting against evil. And again, Star Wars very much so has the concept of good and evil. There is absolute good and absolute evil in the Star Wars universe. Which means when you bring in the Jedi, well, the only thing that can really oppose the Jedi is the Sith, which are the bad. You can't really have the neutral Jedi, or the Grey, for example, because, well, now you don't have a good versus evil story anymore. And if all you do is have Rey continue to be a half-hearted, good and dark character, well, then she ends up as nothing, when nobody cares about her. When Luke himself is like, you went straight to the dark side. Like, okay, so she's bad. But she's good because the story needs her to be good. Does she have a motivation to be good? No, not really. It just seems like the right thing to do. Does she have a motivation to be evil? No, not really. Does she have a motivation in general? The most motivation you can ascribe to the cardboard box that walks is that she sorta kinda cares for the, like, 2 people she knows, I guess. That's about it. You haven't built a character here, and so nobody's going to care about her. And therefore, building the entire next generation of Jedi around her is going to fail disastrously, because you will build an entire generation of Jedi around the idea of, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, okay, why are you rebuilding the Jedi, Rey? Well, you know, Luke kind of told me to, so I guess that's what I'm doing. Even Kathleen Kennedy says that. Well, she kind of promised, so I suppose she has to now. Like, oh, that's a great motivation for a main character. A dead dude told me to. Fantastic. And will her... Maybe you could do it so her students would pull her in the right ways. Like, teacher cardboard, this is really, really dumb. Maybe you should, I don't know, give a shit or something. Maybe you could try and focus the narrative on the students instead, which actually might be trying to do something good. An actual, like, conflict between the light and the dark in the students, but again, you're building this castle on a fundament of quicksand, because you have already rejected the idea of good and evil. And if you don't have good and evil, if you don't have the possibilities of good and evil, you can't have the center ground either. That's the clue. To have a story in which you have people in the middle who aren't necessarily good, but aren't necessarily evil, you must have a concept of what evil and good looks like. Because if you don't know what they look like, you can't really make up a middle ground. For example, let's take an example here. In today's society, the idea of just killing thousands of prisoners of war would be horrific. It would be obvious evil. It would be morally reprehensible. Go back 1,000 years, however, and it was pretty much just simply what was done. Go back further yet, and it would be something to be cheered and celebrated. It might even be done in public as a form of amusement. So again, you need to actually have the idea of what the two extremes look like. Because if you don't have good and you don't have evil, you can't have the middle ground between them. If they exist in a universe like 40k, for example, you can still do absolutely abhorrent things. You can genocide entire populations of people and still be the objective good guy because that population was being infested by chaos. Whereas in Star Wars, since you have failed to actually establish what the two sides are beyond Palpatine bad, Imperium bad, and Rebels good. Okay. What did the Rebels do? Well, they rebel against things. Not to channel George Martin too much here, but what's their taxation policies like? Now that they've defeated the bad guys, now what? What do they do? Why are they good? What are their motivations? Like, we fight for the good things. What good things? Like, describe them. Who is in opposition to you? Are you simply going to bring back the First Order again? Are you simply going to build another Death Star again? Like, you gotta scale down the scale of things, straight up. You gotta focus more on the human stories of Star Wars for at least a little bit, and then instead focus on the grander things. I actually disagree with this as well, because Kennedy were talking about how they were going to keep the spectacles for the movies. I generally think they should go the other way around. Do some character building in the movies, where you can pitch it all in a decently sized package, a la Rogue One. The reason why Rogue One was so well received was because it had the classical character archetypes, simply packaged into a nice little bunch and then thrown at you. You only had a couple of hours to get to know them. They went through all of the usual story beats. They came out of it at the end like characters you would actually give somewhat of a shit about, and even better yet, most of them died, which was fantastic too. And so they became more popular, to the point where Andor, of course, now has his own spin-off series where he is doing his best to undermine that positive first impression that people got of his character. Fantastic. Smaller stories on the big screen, ironically, and larger stories on the small screen, where you have more time to tell them completely. Because, of course, the television series, well, you can make as many goddamn episodes a season as you want. You can tell as large and epic as a complex a story as you want, and you can take as much as time you need to do it. Whereas on the movie, you've only got a couple of hours, maybe 3 at the tops. So, if you're going to be going down this idea of good versus evil and the neutral ground in between it, you should be focusing on the human stories, and instead, just kill Rey. Just kill Rey. If there is one lesson you can take away from this little bit off-the-cuff, unorganized rant, is kill Rey. Kill Rey. Kill Rey. Brutally, preferably, horribly if possible, via torture, if at all feasible. Because once you've absolutely yeeted Rey's ass out the window, not only will people cheer at the destruction of this absolutely god-awful character, but you will then be able to actually establish a proper villain, somebody actually evil. You've established Rey as super powerful, okay, reinforce that, and then have her ass yeeted into the sun by somebody who absolutely eclipses her in every single solitary feasible fashion, and then build a character around the idea of defeating that villain. Literally, create Sauron, and then have Frodo go on a quest to defeat Sauron. Simple. Now you've established good, and you've established evil. Evil is monster person that yeets Rey into the sun, and good is whoever is going to try and stop monster person from doing the same to the entire universe. Simple. But that's probably not how it's going to happen, is it? Because Rey, for some reason or another, has become a bit of the darling of the current Star Wars administration rather than fanbase or crowd, which is, again, somewhat the problem. If Star Wars even survives, that is, because the other alternative is, of course, that they simply just bring it to a close, yeet it off a cliff, and then cut their losses and continue to focus on television, which appears to be where the money actually is, especially now that they've yeeted most of their catalogue, and is probably going to slowly work on rebuilding it with considerably left-leaning shows, considering the list of things they destroyed. We can hope anyways, and that is of course only if Disney survives the next few years, as they are under constant siege by a rather irate Ron DeSantis, and their generally negative public image, to the point that these days, well, as V rather brilliantly pointed out, when Ron DeSantis succeeds in messing with Disney, he gains votes and popularity. Which tells you everything you need to know about Disney's current political situation and standing in the public sphere of things. So, whatever you're going to do, Disney, you better do it fast. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.